Hello, everybody, and welcome to Part 2 of Donald Barr's Space Relations. The High Council of Kossar was in session, a noble spectacle. Each member was panoplied and accoutred according to the tradition of his own domain. The Master of Orm, beefy but sly-looking, wore a slash-sleeved jacket and breeches of saffron velvet, with a curious square black and yellow cap that he declined to remove, even in the council chamber. The Lord Winther, whom many believed to be 150 years old, peered with eyes like bubbles of dark grease out of a narrow, pouchy, lipless countenance. He wore a beetle-like costume modeled on the frock coat of an earth gentleman of the 19th century. General Falkendire was in uniform, complete with space boots and laser pistol, but a uniform bedizened with fanciful splashes of color of the general's own devising. The ribbons of 37 medals, most of them, it was said, also of the general's devising, crowded the slightly concave chest. Alastair, 10th Baron Eobold, wore a hunting costume of green suede. His smooth, wide face bore a look of patrician oafishness, which an elaborate coiffure only emphasized. The Count of Lyme looked like the preeminent intellectual of the gathering. His glittering black eyes, thin straight nose, and thin but well-shaped lips might have suggested some sort of aesthete or abstracted sensuality, but the high, bulging forehead suggested a massive and powerful brain. Only the faintest aura of theatre about the man attenuated the effect. He wore a cassock of dull black silk. Sir Osmond Parad was a small, vivid creature. His wrinkled brown skin had curious bluish highlights. His lips were very red. He wore a flowing, plum-colored robe and a sickly green turban. And the Lady Morgan Sidney, heiress of the great fens of Tregast, wore a flooded white gown with a simple cincture of gold that perfectly matched her hair. High breasts and long thighs printed themselves on the chaste cloth. Her gaze was steady and intent, but there was a tiny, continual ebullition of angry humor in the gray eyes. The mouth was obstinate. The 7 rulers of Kossar swept back into the council chamber after a recess. Orm striding, Winther tottering, Falkendire marching, Eobold drifting, Lynn pacing, Parad mincing, and Lady Morgan moving with a kind of restless restraint. The gaudy retinues and feverish hangers-on were shooed away. The great bronze doors were closed. Parad, chairman for the session, said, "We had reached, had we not, Agenda Item 5, dealing with General Clause 18 of the proposed treaty. Is there discussion? My Lord of Orm." Orm. "Why waste time discussing the general clauses? They're part of the organic law of the treaty organization, aren't they? If we get into the organization, they get into the treaty. I say we ought to be talking about the special clauses, which we can negotiate." Lim. "With all respect, my dear Orm." Lady Morgan. "I agree with Orm." Parad. "The Count is speaking." Lim. "With all respect, my lady and my lord, General Clause 18 is, peculiar in its bearing on this world. It is the only general clause that undertakes to legislate the internal affairs of the member planets, and it prescribes an institution that is part of the fabric of society on Kossar. This..." Lady Morgan. "We can read." Parad. "My lady, please." Lim. "This leaves us with 3 alternatives. First, of course, we can refuse to join the treaty organization. Second, we might conceivably persuade the treaty organization to delete the clause in question from our treaty. Third, we could abolish slavery." Winther. "May I speak?" "Thank you, Sir Osmond. Our good friend Lim has clarified the question for us very well. No, Morgan, my dear, sometimes it is helpful to state the obvious. Let us think about his 3 alternatives. Let us ask 2 questions about them. First, are they mutually exclusive? And second, do they exhaust the possibilities? My answer to both questions is no. Eubald. You're talking in riddles. Orm. What's the use of talking about it at all? We asked them here so we could sign the treaty, didn't we? This is part of the treaty. Eubald. We asked them here to talk about signing the treaty. That's different from signing it. Falkendire. I'm a military man, not a diplomat, and certainly not a logic chopper. If we don't sign this damn treaty, we'll face the Plith alone. If we face the Plith alone, we'll lose. If we lose, we'll be destroyed. And I mean destroyed. Parad. Devoured, in fact. Winther. I doubt that even the Plith would enjoy my stringy old carcass, but Lady Morgan here would be a great delicacy. In fact, my dear, you almost make me wish I were a Plith. Lady Morgan. My lord, I wish I'd known you when you had your teeth. Lim. I must protest, Sir Osmond. This is not in good taste. We are here to discuss serious matters. Parad. Absolutely. Lord Winther, Lady Morgan. Winther. The General has given us a simpler set of alternatives than the Count did. Sign or be eaten. But I will ask my questions about these choices as well. Are they mutually exclusive? And are they exhaustive? Eubald. I see what you mean. We might sign and then be eaten anyway. Winther. Or we might refuse to sign and still get help from the treaty organization if the Plith attack. Earth may not sit by and watch the Plith gobble up the galaxy sun by sun. Falkendire. I'd rather not take that chance, Winther. They'd let our deaths buy time for them. Orm. Anything that adds to our risk is intolerable. Winther. Very well. We've disposed of Lim's first alternative. We will not refuse to sign. That leaves us with his other two choices, persuasion and abolition. I ask again, are they mutually exclusive, and are they exhaustive? Eubald. Oh, I see what you mean. We try to persuade them, and then if that doesn't work, we abolish slavery. As usual, you are almost right, Alistair. We try to persuade them. If that doesn't work, we promise to abolish slavery. Lim. Let me summarize your argument, my dear Winther. I had posited 3 alternatives: isolation, persuasion, and abolition. You have added a 4th: deceit. Winther. A fair summary, and much briefer than most of your summaries. Lim. Let me now comment on the 2nd and 4th alternatives. My lady, my lords, the man who will, we are told, represent Earth in these transactions, this said John Craig, happens, I am informed by my representatives on Earth, to be the author of General Clause 18. You seem surprised, my Lord Winther. Winther. I am surprised you knew, Lim. Lim. Under the circumstances, the probability of successfully persuading this said John Craig to forego this clause is virtually negligible. Winther. Not quite, Lim, not quite. Craig is the author of Clause 18, but he's also thought to be the author of the original plan for the Man-Inhabited Planets Treaty Organization. His pride of authorship, his Clause 18, may be less than his pride of authorship in the whole organization. Lim. It may be. It is certainly an interesting speculation, but I call on you to note that abandoning the clause for us would destroy the clause for all, while abandoning us would not destroy the organization for anyone else. As to my Lord Winther's 4th alternative, deceit, I can scarcely conceive that an institution like slavery could be maintained in a clandestine manner. Our domestic arrangements. Orm.
Let me get something straight, Lim. Just what are you trying to get us to do anyway? Parad. A good question. My dear Count, we have already ruled out isolation, and now you are telling us that persuasion and deceit are hopeless. What remains is abolition. Are you proposing it? Pause. Lady Morgan. Why don't you answer, Lim? Lim. I am proposing nothing. I am merely trying to examine the alternatives. Lady Morgan. You are naming them, not examining them. None of us is examining anything. If we were examining, we would not be talking about slavery. We would talk about slaves and slave owners. What we call slavery is not a domestic arrangement. It is what we do to men and women. My house was built by slaves. My lands are drained and worked by slaves. Who would go down into the mines of Blind Marsh but slaves? Either I am a slave owner or I am a pauper. I will not engage in the squeed trade, and I will tell you something else. I enjoy being a slave owner. Orm. So I hear. Lady Morgan. Everything you hear is true, Orm, my boy. Parad. Are we not getting away from the subject? Lady Morgan. Slavery is the subject. You all know abolition is impossible. The day you are no longer masters, you will be killed, butchered, and not by the plith, by your former slaves. Lim. You carry conviction by your manner, but I do not follow your logic. What physical defenses will we lose? What physical powers will the workers gain when they cease to be chattel slaves and become wage slaves? Slave rebellions are not unknown on this planet. Several of us have put them down, even Tregast. Lady Morgan. Not in my time. Lim. Granted. You were a child when the High Council put down the rebellion against your late father, but the fact remains, it was put down, and every revolt ever since has been put down. No one has proposed to disband the armed forces or to place them under any control but our own. Clause 18 does not touch on it. Parad. You advert to slave rebellions. I believe I have as much experience with them as anyone at this table. I can inform you. They are not actuated by love. They are a sign of something else, something that I, for one, do not wish to set loose. Winther. Sir Osmond, you are missing our friend's point. He is restating a classic principle. Auderint de metuant. It is a sound principle. Let them hate me, so long as they fear me. The author of the principle came to a bad end. At least, I do not recall that the reign of the Emperor Caligula was long. But let us pass that over. What does the principle tell us? It tells us that we must continue to be feared. What slave will fear us if we make what to any slave is the greatest of possible concessions? Emancipation. Falkendire. What people fear is force. If we keep the superior force, we will be feared all we want to be. Orm. We're wasting time. As if to dramatize the master of Orm's words, a buzzer sounded. Parad switched on the communicator view screen. A Ling, punctilious face appeared. The 7 rulers of Kossar could see the flicker of agitation in the eyes. Parad. Yes, McWith. The confidential secretary of the High Council of Kossar said tensely. The Earth representative is now on arrival orbit, sir. He'll be here in less than 2 hours. Parad. Thank you, McWith. He switched off the view screen. Eobold. Now what? Lady Morgan. Very simple. We do the following things, one after another. We try to persuade the Earthman to leave our little domestic arrangements alone. If we can't persuade him, we sign provisionally anyway and try to fool the organization into thinking that we are planning to abolish slavery. If we can't fool them, we meet again and then decide whether to get out of the treaty organization or to give up our slaves and our lives. Winther. Beautifully stated. Lim. Let me comment on one aspect of what Lady Morgan has just said. Orm, I don't think we should let you. Take so long, Lim. Parad, please. Orm, we have a lot to talk about before this fellow Craig gets here. For instance, who's going to do the persuading? And who's to decide whether Craig can or can't be persuaded? Then we have all the special clauses to plan. Falkendire, just one thing. While we're palavering with this Earthman, we have pretty much the same protection as if we belong to the treaty organization. But Clause 18 doesn't apply till we actually sign off on the damn thing. Lim, that, my dear General, is what I had intended to say a moment ago. Orm, good. He saved you the trouble. Now, all this means we're going to need a persuader or negotiator who can go on persuading this fellow for a long time without his getting too impatient. I nominate Lady Morgan Sidney. Lady Morgan, I'm not sure I'm flattered, she laughed. Winther, I second the nomination. It was 2.5 hours later that John Craig, exhausted from his trip, still queasy from coming out of infraspace, and suffering from an unease that was not physical, was ushered into the council chamber. The punctilious MacWith began to pronounce the introductions. My lady and lords of the High Council, His Excellency the Ambassador Extraordinary and Minister Plenipotentiary of the Planetary Federal Republic of Earth, and Principal Delegate of the Organization of Signatories to the Treaty of the Man-Inhabited Planets, the Honorable John Craig, Your Excellency, Her Excellency the Lady Morgan Sidney, Suzerain of Tregast and Blindmarsh, Hereditary Member of the High Council of Kossar, His Excellency Sir Osmond Parad, High Feudatory of Gelac, Suzerain of... The dry old voice of Lord Winther cut in. Will someone fetch Lady Morgan's aide-de-camp? She appears to be overcome. And that'll be the end of Part 2 of Space Relations. God, what are my thoughts this time? My thoughts are... I don't know. I don't... I feel like I need to read more. I feel like I really have no idea what's going on. I mean, I have an idea, but it's like a whole lot of nothing just happened this part, and hopefully part 3 will be a little more interesting. We'll see. This is Ranting Politics. I hope you have a nice day. Bye-bye.